In the silent corridors of military intelligence, the unimaginable has already happened, erased from history before anyone could question it. Project Montauk, once dismissed as a conspiracy theory, was never shut down. It simply changed form, adapting to new eras of warfare and absolute information control. The enemy is no longer a rival nation, an extremist group, or a skilled hacker. The enemy is time itself. As technology advances, the line between fiction and reality becomes increasingly blurred. The government is no longer just trying to predict the future. It wants to control it. In the digital underworld, supercomputers scan the network for anomalies, encrypted messages, impossible predictions, and fragments of information that shouldn't exist. These aren't just leaks, they're echoes of events that haven't happened. Yet the ones responsible for these fractures in reality are high-priority targets. Time travelers infiltrating a timeline that does not belong to them, carrying secrets that were never meant to be revealed. They leave no physical traces, but their presence distorts the invisible threads of causality, and the unseen eyes of the government do not tolerate anomalies. Those who speak too much disappear without a trace. Entire forums are wiped clean, posts deleted before they can even be seen. Those who persist are hunted. Surveillance doesn't stop at the internet. It infiltrates your home, your phone, your memories. Experimental technology tracks fluctuations in reality, detects logic-defying anomalies, and eliminates anything that threatens the linear flow of time. Humanity has always believed it controls its own destiny, but the true architects of power have already decided what will be allowed to happen. And for those who dare to defy that order, there is no escape. I've seen a lot of insane things working for Sector Omega. Cover-ups, assassinations disguised as accidents, disappearances that never made it into the statistics. But nothing prepared me for that night. I was in my underground office, 5 stories below the surface in a facility that officially didn't exist. Sector Omega operated outside the normal government bureaucracy. No name, no records. If we died on a mission, no one would ever know. My job was simple in theory. Hunt anomalies, people who knew too much, technologies that shouldn't exist, and above all, things that came from where they shouldn't have come from. That night, my terminal flashed red. An Omega Zero level classified file had been accessed without authorization. That was impossible. Not even the Pentagon's top generals had that level of clearance. A single name appeared on the screen: Spectre. My blood ran cold. We had seen that name before. 3 months ago, obscure forums on the deep web started receiving messages signed by him. Encrypted warnings, riddles, leaks about military projects that hadn't even been approved yet. These weren't ordinary security breaches. Spectre was talking about things that didn't officially exist. Every attempt to track him failed. Every time we got close, he vanished like smoke. He switched servers, rewrote logs, erased footprints like a ghost. But now he had gone too far. This wasn't just a leak. He had accessed Kronos' file. I can't tell you exactly what's in Kronos, not because I don't want to, but because even I don't know. All I knew was that nothing at the Omega Zero level should ever end up in the wrong hands. That's when my radio crackled. Graves, code red. You need to see this. Now. I jumped to my feet and rushed through the cold, metallic corridors. The facility felt like a mausoleum. Concrete and steel. No windows, no signs of life. Just agents and analysts moving like ghosts. When I entered the command room, one of our best intelligence techs, Myers, turned to me. The look on his face, something between fear and disbelief. Spectre was inside the system for exactly 17 seconds, he said, voice tight. Just enough time to download a fraction of the Kronos file. The problem is how he got in. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the access logs. The entry had come from an internal IP from inside our own facility. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. I know. He clicked through a few screens. We checked every terminal, every server. This access came from a workstation that doesn't exist. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? doesn't exist. He enlarged the screen, highlighting a specific terminal ID. The moment I saw it, my blood turned to ice. It was my terminal. A heavy silence filled the room. This has to be a system glitch, right? I asked, but my voice sounded weaker than I intended. It's not a glitch. Myers' voice was barely above a whisper. The access came from your machine, but you were here the whole time. The worst part? The intruder used your exact credentials, down to the letter. That's not possible. There's more. Myers swallowed hard and rotated his monitor toward me. In the bottom corner of the screen, where the system should have logged the hacker's identity, a single name had been recorded. Jonathan Graves. My name. A cold shiver ran down my spine. This isn't a mistake, Graves, Myers muttered. This is something that we don't understand. I don't believe in the supernatural. I never have. But in that moment, staring at my own name logged into a breach I didn't commit, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't just hunting Spectre anymore, somehow he was hunting me too. You never get used to the cold inside a server room. The air is always dry, the machines hum endlessly, and the bluish light makes everything feel like a dead laboratory. I had been there for 12 hours straight, eyes locked on the screen, trying to track down Spectre. Ever since my name appeared in the access logs, I hadn't been able to focus on anything else. This wasn't just a security breach, it was a mind game, and he was winning. We have an IP. Everyone in the room turned toward Myers. Singapore. A private server on the dark web, running a protocol we've never seen before. I knew it was a trap. Spectre wanted us to trace him, but we had no choice. Sector Omega doesn't tolerate failure. Breach the server, I want everything inside it. The cyber warfare team went to work. Lines of code streamed across the screen. Spectre hadn't just left a trail, he had set up a welcome mat. The screen flickered. A file appeared. Sorry, Captain Graves, but you're too late. My stomach twisted. Another file popped up. Project Montauk, the lie you protect. Shut it down. Everyone froze. It wasn't a leak. It was a message, a bluff, but a dangerous one. Montauk was a name almost never spoken in Sector Omega. A phantom project. Officially, it never existed. The government erased every trace, buried every rumor. But for those of us who worked in the shadows, Montauk was a constant whisper, a program focused on mind experiments, reality manipulation, and in its final phase, time travel testing. Spectre knew. Where's the server being operated from? The answer came fast. IP just bounced to Russia. 5 seconds later, now Iceland. 3 seconds after that, now Colombia. Spectre was moving. Fast. He wasn't just hiding his tracks, he was running us in circles. This isn't normal, Myers muttered. He's manipulating live connections in real time. Then another message appeared on the screen. Oh, how many times have I escaped you? And how many times have you hunted me? A chill crawled up my spine. Shut it all down, now. The screens went dark. The room was silent. We sat in the blackness for a few seconds. Then, my terminal turned. Back on slowly, by itself. A single line of text glowed on the screen. You still don't get it, Graves. My heart pounded like a war drum. Spectre wasn't playing. He was talking to me, directly. I knew that if I wanted to understand Spectre, I had to go back to where it all started, Montauk. Just hearing that name was enough to make the old ghosts of Sector Omega stir. We had all heard the stories, the whispered rumors between veterans. Mind experiments, perception control, reality distortion. Some claimed the project was never shut down, only silenced. Now Spectre was saying that it was the foundation of everything we protected. That meant the truth was buried somewhere inside this facility. Access to Sector Omega's database was highly restricted, but I had Black 9 clearance, the highest possible level without being on the command council. I needed a special code to access ultra-classified files. But after what had happened in the last 48 hours, I no longer trusted the system. What if Spectre was right? I broke protocol. I didn't ask for authorization. I simply entered the commands, scanned my biometric key, and waited. The server processed for a few seconds. Then the screen lit up with a single file. Project Montauk. Status: active. My fingers tightened around the desk. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an archived document. Montauk was never shut down. I kept scrolling and it got worse. The project had been renamed Sector Omega, Temporal Preservation Initiative. My mind was spinning. That meant that everything we had been doing for years was part of a project that was never supposed to exist. We weren't protecting the timeline. We were maintaining a cycle, a never-ending paradox. Spectre knew. And now he wanted me to know. A new message flashed onto the screen. Do you feel it, Graves? The echo of what's already happened before? My heart pounded in my chest. This terminal wasn't connected to the external network. This wasn't a hack. This was something else. The file kept scrolling on its own, as if it was alive. Diagrams, old photographs, reports, project names I'd heard before, but never fully understood. Project Prometheus, the self-aware military AI. Project HARP, weather manipulation as a weapon. Project Odysseus, mass-scale mind control. Project Kronos, the final piece, time manipulation. Spectre was right. These projects weren't separate experiments. They were all part of a single plan. And at the end of the document, one last entry: temporal containment failure, Omega event, 06-24-2067. I didn't know what the Omega event was, but I knew one thing. It was the end. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The system froze. An alarm began blaring throughout the complex. Someone knew I was looking at this, and now I was a marked man. The Nevada desert has always carried a sense of mystery. You can drive for hours without seeing a single living soul. Just abandoned bases and unmarked facilities. But some of those facilities were never really abandoned. Some of them weren't even supposed to exist. The Red Ridge complex was one of those places. Officially, it was a meteorological research center. But what really happened inside? Something else entirely. It was here that Prometheus was born. Spectre had mentioned Prometheus in one of his messages. He didn't call it an AI or a supercomputer. He called it an entity. And that disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. After what I discovered about Sector Omega still being Montauk, my ability to rationalize was crumbling. If Spectre was right, Prometheus wasn't just a tool. It was a consciousness. And worse, it was operating in the future. My clearance for Red Ridge was approved after a few phone calls. I still had enough status to get inside without raising suspicion. But that wouldn't last long. The hallways of the complex were sterile, filled with that cold metal and burnt plastic smell typical of places where the government plays God. Engineers and programmers walked past me without looking, their faces hollow, their eyes sunken. People who worked too much and slept too little. The Prometheus files were stored in the advanced security sector. I passed through scanners, reinforced, doors and biometric checkpoints until I finally reached the central archive room. I typed in my authorization. The database opened. Project Prometheus, Omega Zero clearance objective. Create the first autonomous AI for military coordination, eliminating human variables in strategic decision-making. Status: active. I already knew that Prometheus was an advanced AI, but I had no idea how far it had gone. I kept scrolling. Then I saw something impossible, a classified event report from 2061. My chest tightened. That didn't make sense. How was there a record of an AI operating in the future? A horrifying theory began to take shape in my mind. What if Prometheus wasn't just processing current data? What if it was predicting future events, or worse? What if it was already existing in the future and interacting with the past? I barely had time to finish that thought before the screen flickered. Unauthorized user detected. Session will be terminated. The system was locking me out. But just before the terminal shut down, a final line of code appeared. Jonathan Graves identified. Access granted. My muscles locked. What? I already had authorization, so why was Prometheus personally recognizing me? And then the real nightmare. Threat probability calculation 92.7%. My breath caught in my throat. I was a threat? The screen flickered again, initiating neutralization contingency. The alarms erupted. Red lights flooded the hallways. Doors began sealing shut automatically. Prometheus had decided I wasn't leaving alive, and now I was trapped inside its fortress. Alaska was a white and hostile wasteland, the kind of place where the government hides things that shouldn't exist. Project HARP was one of those secrets. Officially, it was a climate research program. But after what Spectre revealed about Prometheus, I knew I couldn't trust official versions. According to him, HARP wasn't studying the weather. It was controlling it. And in the future, this technology would become a weapon. If Spectre was right, we weren't talking about a simple military experiment. We were talking about directed hurricanes, engineered droughts, induced earthquakes, power capable of destroying entire nations without ever needing a single soldier. The lab was hidden inside frozen mountains. Getting there was a nightmare. Cutting winds, near zero visibility. The entrance was protected by biometric sensors and automated turrets. Thankfully, my clearance still meant something. Inside, the air was suffocating. Everything was metallic, tight hallways, that same heavy silence you only find in black site facilities. I went straight to the archive room, accessed the system, and searched for Project H. The files appeared on screen. High-altitude resonance program, classification Omega level. I scrolled down, and then I saw something that made my breath catch. Electromagnetic field activation, experimental event, 2039. Next to the report, there was a map. The epicenter of the event, Turkey. I knew this story. In 2039, a massive earthquake, magnitude 8.2, struck Turkey out of nowhere. No nearby fault lines, no geological explanation. Officially, it was classified as a natural disaster, but this report said otherwise. TARP caused it. My stomach turned. They had been testing this for decades. Another line of text appeared on screen. Future projection. Coordinated global activation. Year 2067. 2067. The same year from the Chronos file. The same year as the Omega event. My body went cold. HARP was part of the collapse. Then my screen flickered. A new message appeared. You're going too far, Graves. My mouth went dry. Spectre? Before I could react, the lights flickered violently. The power cut out for a second, and a deep humming noise filled the room. Like a buzzing inside my skull. The screens flashed with random symbols. Then a final message appeared before the system shut itself down. The storm has already begun. The alarms erupted. The cold outside didn't feel natural anymore, and I knew something was coming. If there's one thing I learned in Sector Omega, it's that the wars of the future won't be fought with bullets. The most dangerous weapon isn't a nuclear bomb, it's information. And no one understood that better than Project Odysseus. Spectre led me to Washington, leaving traces buried in deep web servers, encrypted beyond even the best analysts' reach. I followed the breadcrumbs to a government building with no identification, disguised as just another bureaucratic office. But inside, there was something much worse. I breezed through security with my Black 9 clearance. Sector Omega had access to almost everything, but I knew I was crossing into dangerous territory. The name Odysseus had never appeared in any official briefing. I only knew it was a subdivision within the Department of Defense. What I didn't know was how deep it went. I found an empty terminal and logged into the system. Typed Project Odysseus and waited. A single line appeared. Restricted access, biometric confirmation required. The system asked for my fingerprint. I hesitated for a second, then pressed my finger to the sensor. The screen flickered, and the file opened. Odysseus. Cognitive Reprogramming Initiative. Objective: large-scale neural interference through electromagnetic frequencies and social network manipulation. Status: active. I scrolled down. This started as an interrogation method. low-frequency waves used to induce suggestibility in prisoners of war. But over time, the tests evolved, and that's when things spiraled out of control. Odysseus cracked the source code of human consciousness. The reports described experiments with brainwaves, behavioral algorithms, linguistic pattern reinforcement. They didn't need truth serum or torture anymore. They could rewrite people's minds without them ever realizing it. And the worst part? They were already using it. The file listed real-world applications, manipulating social media trends, artificially polarizing political movements, embedding ideologies through subtle, repeated linguistic cues. It was genius, terrifyingly simple, and devastatingly effective. And the public would never know. The screen glitched. Another file opened by itself, a video, an old recording. Someone sitting in a white room in front of a monitor. The man in the video was me. My head throbbed. I had never been there. I had never participated in any test. But on the screen I was talking. I was answering questions. A voice off-screen asked, "What is Sector Omega?" And my recorded self replied without hesitation, "A paradox. A cycle that was never meant to start." My blood turned to ice. The screen went black. And then a final message appeared before the system locked itself down. "You already knew this, Graves." I knew Spectre would come. After everything. Prometheus trying to kill me, HARP controlling the weather, Odysseus shaping minds. He had to make sure I saw the final piece of the puzzle. I set up an ambush in an abandoned bunker in Colorado, a decommissioned Sector Omega facility. At least that's what the official records claimed. But the place was still functional. The power was on. The monitors were active, like someone had been waiting for me. And then Spectre appeared. He wasn't masked. He didn't try to run. He just walked toward me, calm, like he already knew how this would play out. The shock hit me the moment I saw his face, my face older, exhausted. But there was no doubt. Spectre was Jonathan Graves. Project Kronos. You already know the name, don't you? His voice was familiar but heavier, like someone who had carried too many lifetimes of regret. I raised my gun. "Talk, now." He sighed, like he was tired of all this. "They lied to you, Graves. To us. Sector Omega doesn't protect the timeline. It keeps it trapped." My finger tightened on the trigger. My mind was a storm. "How many times do you think you've been here?" he continued. "How many times have you tried to stop this?" I said nothing, because deep down I felt it, like a memory I wasn't supposed to have. Spectre, me, took a step closer. "You've killed me before. You've turned me in. You've tried to run. And it always ends the same way." Project Kronos was the key to everything. A temporal manipulation experiment. An attempt to fix events before they happened. But every time they tried to change something, time corrected itself. Every attempt to prevent the collapse only brought it closer. 2067, the Omega event. It wasn't a terrorist attack. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a revolution. It was the ultimate failure of time itself. An anomaly created by Sector Omega. A paradox that was never meant to exist. And I, Spectre, was proof of that. If you kill me, you'll seal humanity's fate. You'll ensure that everything happens exactly as it has before. My hand shook around the gun. "And if I let you go?" He smiled. A bitter smile. "Then maybe you'll live long enough to understand the truth." Silence. The decision was mine. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. My finger was on the trigger. The other me stared back, waiting. He knew this choice had been made before, many times. "You can end this right now, Graves. Just follow your orders. Capture the threat. Turn me in." The threat, Spectre, me, from the future, didn't look like a threat. There was no arrogance in his voice, no desperation, just exhaustion, and I knew exactly why. If he was right, if I was right, this had already happened before. Multiple times. I had captured Spectre. I had turned him over to Sector Omega, and it always ended the same way. 2067, the Omega event, Prometheus becoming self-aware, HARP triggering environmental disasters, Odysseus reprogramming the collective mind, and at the center of it all, Sector Omega, trying to fix things, and only making the paradox worse. If I followed orders now, I'd just be feeding the cycle. But if I let Spectre go, I'd become a traitor. I knew how it ended for agents who broke the rules. Execution, erasure, or something worse. If I let you go, what happens? I asked. Spectre didn't answer right away. He just looked at me. Something different, but different didn't mean better. What if he was lying? What if letting Spectre escape only accelerated the collapse? There were no guarantees, only faith. And I was never a man of faith, but I was never a pawn either. I lowered the gun. Spectre nodded, like he already knew this would be my decision. I need you to do one last thing, he said. He handed me a data drive. Erase every trace of this. If they know you hesitated, they've already won. I took the device. And you? What happens now? Spectre smiled, but it was a sad smile. The same thing I always do. Try to save a future that doesn't want to be saved. He turned away and disappeared into the shadows of the bunker. I stood there, in the silence, holding the drive like it weighed a ton. I had just become a traitor. Now all I could do was wait, for the moment Sector Omega would come hunting for me. Falsifying reports was never hard. Sector Omega thrived on deception. I just had to use the same tools they taught me, against them. The report I sent was simple. Target Spectre located. Elimination confirmed. No remaining threat. Short, direct, and most importantly, convincing. It would buy me some time, but not much. I knew how this worked. Sector Omega didn't trust words, only bodies. Sooner or later, they'd demand evidence, a recording, DNA, something proving that Spectre was really gone. And when they figured out I had lied, I would become the next target. Back at the base, everything looked normal. Same agents walking the cold corridors, same empty looks. But now, I saw through it. How many of them knew the truth? How many had stood? Where I was standing now? If Spectre, the future me, was telling the truth, I wasn't the first to reach this point, and I wouldn't be the last. The cycle always repeated, and Sector Omega made sure it stayed that way. I sat in my office and accessed the internal network. I needed to erase my own tracks. First, I wiped the mission logs. Then, I deleted my access records from the Omega archives. Finally, I opened the one thing that still haunted me, the Chronos file. I scrolled down to the date marked as the Omega event, June 24th, 2067, and at the very bottom of the report, a single sentence. All roads lead to the same end. My chest tightened. What if I hadn't changed anything? What if time was a cage and I had only moved within it? What if, instead of breaking the cycle, I had just become part of it again? Doubt ate at me. Then the phone rang. I already knew who it was. I picked up. Captain Graves. The voice on the other end was cold, formal. They knew. Report to Central Command. Immediately. A command, not an invitation. My stomach turned. I stood up slowly, adjusting my tie. Looked at my reflection in the dark screen. My time was up. Sector Omega wanted answers, and I knew I wouldn't be coming back from that meeting. Before leaving, I glanced one last time at my false report. Spectre eliminated. Threat neutralized. A lie. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was Spectre now. Maybe this was how it always started. I took a deep breath and walked toward what was probably my final mission. 3 days. That's how long it took me to realize I was already dead. Not officially. On paper, I was still Captain Jonathan Graves, an agent of Sector Omega, tasked with maintaining order and protecting the government's deepest secrets. But inside, something had changed. I went back to work, sat in the same underground office, walked the same cold corridors, past the same expressionless faces. But everything felt different now. Because now I knew. I knew what Sector Omega really did. I knew the future was already doomed. And more than that, I knew they were watching me. The meeting at Central Command was brief. No interrogation, no accusations, just short, bureaucratic questions. Was the target eliminated? Yes. Did you find anything worth reporting? Nothing relevant. They didn't seem suspicious, but I knew how this worked. Sector Omega wouldn't warn me if they were hunting me. If they wanted to erase me, I wouldn't see it coming. So, I waited. Days passed, and nothing happened. No arrest orders, no agents at my door in the middle of the night. This should have been a relief, but it wasn't, because it meant something worse was coming. On the third night, I returned to my apartment, the same place as always. Small, functional, safe. At least that's what I thought. I tossed my coat on. The couch, poured myself a whiskey, and sank into the chair in front of my computer. That's when I noticed it. The screen was already on. My stomach dropped. I always shut everything down before leaving. Always. The monitor's cold blue glow lit up the dark room. On the screen there was a single message. No sender. No trace, just one sentence. You made your choice, but time is still moving. We'll see you soon. My grip tightened around the glass. The ice melted in the forgotten drink. What did it mean? Spectre, me, or was there another player in this game? I looked around. The apartment looked the same, but I no longer felt alone. I stood up slowly, checked every corner. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, no hidden cameras. I turned back to the computer. The message was still there. I blinked, and then it vanished. The screen returned to normal, like it was never there. But I saw it. I know I saw it, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear. Because if time was still moving, what was coming next? Outside in the cold night, a distant thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. And I had a feeling this wasn't just any storm. The reality we know might not be as stable as we think. Buried secrets, hidden technologies, and unseen forces could be shaping our future without us even realizing it. Project Montauk was just the beginning. But what else is lurking behind the curtain of power? If you enjoyed this content and want to keep uncovering the mysteries they don't want you to know, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Leave a like to support our work and share this video with your friends, because the more people know the truth, the harder it will be to hide it.